But what are you supposed to do if he's there? Like, you can't not have him there. The front office has to do that. So if you are Terry Francona and you are saddled with John Exford there in your bullpen, well, I'm going to try to find somewhere to put him in. But, man, Terry, I would not put him in leverage situations like that. I can't remember a time John Exford has come in a game this season and I've said, wow, this is a good spot for John Exford. He's cost the Indians at least 10 games this season between the blown saves and things like Saturday's game. But I'm even going to look past that. Why is John Exford playing? I already gave you the answer. 4.5 million reasons why John Exford is playing. I said it to somebody last night. If John Exford was making $500,000 this year, he'd have been DFA'd a month and a half ago. Take it to the bank. Take it to the bank. But the Indians do not pay people not to play. That's all there is to it. If they could get the disabled list guys out there pitching in, I mean, maybe you can't play in the game, but you could, help carry some stuff to the dugout or something. They're all about getting value for every dollar that they spend. So that's why John Exford was out there. But here's what made me mad over the whole weekend more than anything else. I know it's hard when you look at that Rayburn throw to say what else made me mad. The fact that does a playoff team, does a team that is truly deserving of being in that conversation, after you have fallen down 2 games to none in the series, and you've got a chance to split on the way down, do you go up 5-0 early and give it back and choke it away? And that one hurt me over the weekend more than the other ones, even more than losing Kluber's, because that was one of those that if you bounce back, you could chalk it up to, it's just one of the stupid things that happen in a 162-game season. And, you don't see it in very many 162-game seasons, but you could chalk it up at least as a fluke. Never going to happen again. If for no other reason, then we won't put him out there again. But you could chalk it up. But, man, that one was the backbreaker. And I was really impressed at bouncing back yesterday for that reason, because I'll tell you what, I thought maybe Saturday night might have been the backbreaker for the season. I thought that might have been the one that breaks the Indian spirit. And I'm just being honest with you, even being still 3.5 games out of the wild card, because it just seemed like at that point, look at the beginning of the trip. I'm not even saying 3 out of 4. You take the first 3 in a row from Detroit. You come out of the break red hot, smoking, end up taking 3 out of 4, go to Minnesota, middle part of that trip. I think back to Dan Wismar a week ago today, pointing right to that and say, hey, man, I don't care what Minnesota's record is. They play tough, and they do. They play the game the right way. They take 2 out of 3 from the Tribe. And then you go to Kansas City, which was crucial at the back end of this thing, because that's your direct competition right now. You can't even zero in on Detroit yet. Right now, the direct battle is the Indians and Kansas City, both for second place in the division and in that wild card positioning there behind the Yankees and Seattle in that. So that was huge. And I mean, you can look at this series and say the Indians should have walked away with a split. My gut says they should have walked away taking 3 out of 4, but they didn't. What they should have done and what they did are two different things, and they didn't. They lost 3 out of 4. But the one that stung me was Saturday, and I'm sure a lot of you guys agree. I mean, when you think about the frustration, had it on the first game, gave it away with that excellent Kluber performance. Second game, claw your way back, Exford blows it. Even then, if you're looking to justify it, you can go, well, Exford screwed that up. He shouldn't have been in there anyway. You jump out 5-0 in game 3. You're like, okay, and Indians aren't playing, man. They're going to go out here and get some revenge and take the split. And then when you choke it up and you give up 7 runs, 1 run in the third, 4 in the fourth, 2 in the fifth. I just said, man, a playoff team doesn't do that. You can't do that. Not when the chips are down, when you have to go get a win. And they did. I will come back to yesterday. They did when the chips were down. They could have folded. I mean, Indians very easily could have laid down yesterday and came home just getting swept with their head between their legs, or their tail between their legs, their head between their shoulders, slumped down and disappointed. And they didn't. They came back. They took care of business yesterday. But, I point to all of those things that we just talked about. They basically went 500. They went a game under 500 on this trip. They're a game under 500 for the season. At this point, that is what the Indians are. It doesn't mean it's what they have to be. I'll go to Santana. Let's start going into some of the good things. Carlos Santana. absolutely warming up. Let me give you some run here on Carlos Santana, by the way. And let me give you, before I even talk about Santana, Indians fans, you want to know another reason that you should definitely feel that there's time left in this season and that the Indians do still have some time to make some hay here? I'll tell you why. Because as of tomorrow, when the homestand starts, the Indians have the 4th best home record in baseball and have played the fewest home games so far this season. The Indians have only played 48 home games. It's the lowest in all of Major League Baseball, and they're a 600 team at home. So the fact that they've got a truckload at home down the stretch, and we've talked about that September schedule too, keep that in mind. Those are things that keep the Indians in the discussion, even when their play doesn't keep them in it. But now let me talk about Slam Tana. My man, multiple home run game. I mean, he went to town against Kansas City over the weekend. Let's be real. Matter of fact, what was the list of players? A ton of the most prolific batters. You can go through tons of them. Hall of Famers, all kinds of guys that didn't do what Carlos Santana did, man. I mean, 5 home runs in that series over Kansas City. Set the Indians team record for number of home runs in a series. He's also got 6 homers in 6 games, and he's homered in 3 consecutive games. Carlos Santana. We talked, remember about a month back, about how that run brought his season average down of about 6 weeks, where realistically, other than that, everything he's done is phenomenal. His on-base, the fact that a man's on-base percentage is so much higher than his batting average, it's almost one of those unrealistic stat lines, because you look at it and you go, man. And part of my gut says, man, if a guy's hitting, like, back earlier, he's hitting 177 or something, why is he walking so much? It's because he knows how to work pitchers regardless. And really, a 6-week poor batting slump, average-wise, is what took his season down, because look at his numbers otherwise here. But yeah, as I said, he's homered in 3 straight games, 4 of his last 6. He's got 6 total home runs in 6 games. He has 5 multi-home run games in his career, 2 of them this weekend against Kansas City, and first player in Indians history to have a multiple home run game as a catcher, as a DH, and as a first baseman. And in his last 6 games, Slam Tana's reached base safely 20 of 29 plate appearances, 14 of 23, a 609 average, 3 doubles, 6 homers, 10 ribbies, 5 walks, 8 runs scored. He became, check this out, all of the prolific hitters in Indians history. Carlos Santana joined Hafner, Matt Williams, Albert Bell, Joe Carter, and Hal Trotsky as the only Indians players to have ever hit 5 home runs in a series. That's some company right there. And he wasn't the only one. As Drubal, Brantley, Gomi, all had multi-hit games. So, but here's my thing that it's like that other shoe, talking all this great stuff about Santana. Look back at the chart that we referenced last week, how every time 2 or 3 guys are lighting it up and just starting to get white hot for the Indians offensively, a different group of guys are getting cold. I mean, if they could just get the core group of guys all hitting at the same time, yes, this team could add up to what it is. Because I'll go back to what I said earlier. This team is still a good baseball team, regardless of where they finish. This team is a good baseball team. Are they a good enough baseball team to reach where we want them to reach where they want themselves to? I don't know. I do believe the pieces are there. I'm going to go back to the line that I used in spring training. They have the right pieces here on this team. It's a matter of getting them all in the right place and going at the same time and working together. And that's been the problem all year. Swisher, nice to see in the chat room. Swisher broke his 0 for 21. Seems like I'm going to go back to it. Nick Swisher's always 1 for something all season long. I'm telling you, man. I'm not with the Brohio, man. That's in the future. That's going to be an albatross for the next couple of years that is going to make this Indians team making those big moves really hard. Because Mike Brandenberry and I were talking last week, and he said the Indians really need to not just, we're not even talking about adding payroll next year, but redistribute where the money is spent. How do you do that when you've got $30 million tied up in 2 players? I mean, which in the general baseball terms doesn't sound like a lot, but in small market baseball terms it is, because think about it. Let's assume the salary cap, or not the salary cap, I wish baseball had a salary cap. Let's assume that the Indians' budget next year is going to go up a little bit to, let's say $95-ish million. Well, with Bourne and Swisher alone, you have now got a full 30 or 35% of that tied up in 2 players. You have 60% of your payroll left to cover the other 23 spots, I mean, so where's your redistribution? Because to me, if I'm going to have $30 million tied up in 2 players, as much as some people went nuts for Brohio when they signed him, and I'm not going to jump all out on Bourne. I mean, but clearly he's a different person since he came here than he was. And again, both of them, tail end, overpay. We know the whole story. But at the end of the day, if I had $30 million tied up in 2 players, I'd rather have $30 million tied up in David Price and Scotty Kazmir. And I'm just throwing 2 good pitchers' names out there. But that's the kind of redistribution the Indians need. They can't. They're not going to get out from under those. They're not going to get out from under those. And now I want to jump into something else. Bruce just reminded me in the chat room, Masterson. Let me talk for a second. I've always been in the corner of Terry Francona, and I still listen, I love the job that Tito does most days. He brought credibility here. He helped the Indians get through a really dark period. The Ledge, they were on it with the way things ended there under Manny Acta. So do not take this as a total blasting of Terry Francona, but I've seen some chinks in the armor, and I've seen some chips in some things that I didn't like, and I'll give you one of them when it comes to Masterson. I saw some signs of being, I don't want to use the term yes man, because he's his own man, but there's relationships. We know that there's interpersonal relationships with the front office and Terry Francona and your friends. Let me say something about Masterson. The other day, when he went down and made his second AAA start, I don't know if you guys heard this, but Terry Francona, before the start, said, we advised him to pitch tonight like it's a playoff game, a major league playoff game. We want to see him at his very best. That's what Terry said before Masterson made his rehab start. Totally in agreement, because they wanted to make sure, because Terry's exact words was, once we go, we go. Once he's back, and there's no going back to the minors, going back to the disabled list. But his exact words was, we told Justin to treat tonight's start like it's a playoff game at major league level. That's what they said before the game. Then he went out there and threw 110, 108 pitches to be exact. He walked 6, gave up 6, did not pitch well at all through 6 innings. Afterwards, Terry Francona completely changed what he said about that start. And he said, well, we knew that it was a minor league start, and he was going to fiddle with certain pitches and not treat it like a major league game. That is an exact opposite, exact contrast of what he said before the start. And the minute that now it's one thing to say something and stick with your opinion, even if it's contrary to what everybody else is saying. And that's one thing I had usually respected out of Terry Francona. But that felt to me totally like backing out of what you said, because the results were not what you thought, and you're pitching the narrative that the front office wants you to tell. Because Terry Francona had to justify to the media why Justin Masterson, after 2 dismal AAA performances, is being put back in the major league rotation. And then, and a lot of fans, I will tell you this, of all the Indians talk I got last week, the biggest feedback I got was from that article that went out about how the Indians and Antonetti look at getting Justin Masterson back as good as making a trade. Getting him back will be as good as making a trade. I got dozens of emails and responses to that of people saying, I'm sick and tired of that logic. Now, from that perspective, I can't blame you. Now, I'll blame you for giving up on the Indians in July. That's your fault. You should not do that. But I can't blame you for getting mad about that, because that's the truth. That's the Indians' way of telling you that, hey, this is what it is, and we're trotting him back out there. But I just got mad at Terry Francona because he doubled over on himself and what he said. He said one thing before the game and one thing